That night, beneath the golden glow of crystal chandeliers and the soft clink of champagne flutes, they laughed in my face simply because I declined dessert. But months later, I stood in the center of that very restaurant, not as a guest, but as the new owner, holding the power to decide everything. And tonight, they would learn that when I strike back, I don't just reclaim what's fair. I take their entire stage. My name is Margaret Lewis, Maggie to those who know me, and at 68, I thought I'd seen enough of life's petty cruelties to let them roll off my back. 37 years of teaching elementary school in Wilmington had given me thick skin and patience deeper than the Cape Fear River. But that February evening at Harbor and Hearth changed something in me. The restaurant sat like a jewel on Water Street, its windows glowing amber against the darkening sky. I dressed carefully for the occasion. My navy dress with the pearl buttons, the one I'd worn to parent-teacher conferences when I needed to command respect. Mark, my only son, had insisted on this dinner to celebrate his recent engagement to Samantha. Her parents are dying to meet you. Mom, he'd said, his voice bright with that particular blindness of new love. Harold and Vivian Kent arrived precisely at 7, sweeping through the door as if they owned the place. Harold's gray suit probably cost more than my monthly pension, and Vivian's diamonds caught the light like tiny spotlights announcing their arrival. Samantha kissed the air near my cheek, her perfume, something French and aggressive, making my eyes water. "Margaret, how lovely," Vivian said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she took in my modest dress. "Samantha tells us you're retired. How restful that must be." The maitre d' led us to what they called the premier table, a round affair draped in white linen, positioned where everyone could see us and we could see everyone. The Kents ordered without looking at prices, their voices carrying that particular confidence of people who'd never worried about overdraft fees. "The foie gras here is exceptional," Harold announced, gesturing with his menu, though I suppose not everyone appreciates such delicacies. I ordered the salmon, a safe choice at $32 that still made my teacher's instincts wince. Throughout the appetizers and entrees, I listened to them discuss their recent trip to the Amalfi Coast, their renovation of their historic home, their country club's upcoming gala. Mark tried to include me, bless him, but Samantha would steer the conversation back to topics that highlighted what I didn't have: vacation homes, stock portfolios, connections at the yacht club. Then came the moment that would change everything. "Now for the best part," Vivian declared as our server, a young woman named Laura with perfectly styled blonde hair approached with dessert menus. "The chocolate souffle here is absolute heaven. We'll have 4, and perhaps some of that divine dessert wine?" "Actually," I said quietly, "I'll pass on dessert. Thank you." The table went silent. Laura's pencil hovered over her pad, her eyebrows lifting slightly. "Oh, come now." Samantha laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "Don't be shy. Margaret, this is a celebration." "I'm quite full, thank you," I said, folding my napkin. Harold and Vivian exchanged glances, the kind married couples perfect over decades, entire conversations in a single look. Vivian's lips curved into a smile that could have frozen the harbor. "Well," she said, drawing out the word, "I suppose when one is mindful of expenses, even a $15 dessert can seem extravagant." She turned to Laura. "Just 3 soufflés then." "Some of us understand that life's little pleasures are worth the investment." Samantha giggled. "Oh, Mother, but really, Margaret, you should learn to treat yourself." Pinching pennies might have been necessary on a teacher's salary, but surely now. "It's quite all right," Harold added, his tone dripping condescension. "Not everyone understands the art of living well. It's rather sweet, actually, how some people cling to their frugal habits." Laura smirked as she collected the menus, and I caught her exchange a knowing look with another server. The tables around us had grown quiet, the way people do when they sense blood in the water but want to appear uninterested. I felt heat rise from my chest to my cheeks, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for my water glass. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Mom's just practical," Vivian finished for him. "Yes, we can see that. How quaint." The soufflés arrived with a flourish, Laura making a show of presenting them. The Kents and Samantha dug in with exaggerated moans of pleasure, discussing the texture, the temperature, the perfect balance of bitter and sweet. Each comment felt like another small knife sliding between my ribs. "You really should try a bite," Samantha said, waving her spoon at me, "though I suppose when you're not used to fine dining." I sat there, spine straight as it had been through thousands of classroom hours, and smiled. Not the warm smile I gave my students or the gentle one I'd perfected for difficult parents. This was something new, a smile that didn't touch my eyes, that promised nothing and revealed less. "I'm perfectly content," I said, but I wasn't. As they laughed and savored their $15 chocolate clouds, something crystallized inside me. I memorized every detail, the way the light caught Vivian's diamonds, Harold's casual gesture for the check, Samantha's pitying glance at my empty place setting, Laura's superior smirk as she cleared the table. When we finally left, the Kents insisted on walking us to our cars. My 10-year-old Honda looked particularly shabby next to their pristine Mercedes. "Such a lovely evening," Vivian said, her tone suggesting otherwise. "We simply must do this again, perhaps somewhere more casual next time, somewhere you'd be more comfortable. Margaret." As I drove home through the familiar streets of Wilmington, past the old houses and beneath the ancient oaks, I made a decision. They thought the story ended with me declining dessert, with them having their laugh at the penny-pinching old teacher. They were wrong. That was just the beginning. The business card had been sitting on the hostess stand like a sign from above. Daniel Brooks, owner, Harbor and Hearth. I'd slipped it into my purse while waiting for my coat, a small act of theft that felt like the first step in something larger. Back home in my modest 2-bedroom house on Market Street, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at that card. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the lemon bars I'd baked that morning, a teacher's habit of bringing homemade treats that I couldn't quite shake. My hands were steady now, the trembling humiliation replaced by something colder, more calculated. At 9:30 p.m., I called Elaine Porter. "Maggie?" Elaine's voice was surprised but warm. We'd been friends since our daughters played together in elementary school, though her path had led to corporate law while mine stayed in the classroom. "It's been too long. How are you?" "I need your expertise," I said, skipping pleasantries. "Hypothetically, if someone wanted to buy a restaurant, what would that process look like?" Elaine laughed. "That's quite a hypothetical. You thinking of going into the restaurant business?" "Maybe." I traced the edge of Daniel Brooks' card with my finger. "I have that money from selling Mom's property in Castle Hayne. It's just been sitting there. That was what, $300,000 after taxes?" Elaine's voice shifted, becoming more professional. "That could be a decent down payment, depending on the restaurant. Most banks want to see 20 to 30% down for a commercial loan. You'd need to prove you could manage it, show cash flow projections. What if the owner wanted to sell quickly, privately? That changes things. Motivated sellers can be very flexible. Want me to make some inquiries?" "Not yet," I said. "I need to do some research first." Over the next 2 weeks, I became a student again. The Wilmington Public Library became my second home as I devoured books on restaurant management, studied profit margins, learned about food costs and labor percentages. I filled 3 notebooks with neat handwriting, the same kind I'd used for lesson plans. But now the subject was revenge served at exactly the right temperature. I also became a regular at Harbor and Hearth's bar. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m., I'd sit at the far end, nursing a single glass of house wine while pretending to read. Really, I was observing. Daniel Brooks usually appeared around 5, making his rounds, looking increasingly tired. His shoulders sagged. His smile seemed forced. I watched him deal with difficult customers, demanding staff, the endless small crises of restaurant life. On my 4th visit, opportunity presented itself. "Another glass?" the bartender asked. "Just water, please," I said. "Long day?" He laughed bitterly. "Every day's long in this business. Dan's talking about selling again. 3rd time this month he's mentioned it." My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice casual. Really, this place seems so successful. Success doesn't mean happiness, he said, lowering his voice. His wife wants him to retire. Spend time with the grandkids up in Raleigh. He's got a bad heart, too. Doc says the stress isn't helping. That night, I composed my letter carefully. Old-fashioned, handwritten on good stationery, the kind of personal touch a man Daniel's age would appreciate. Dear Mr. Brooks, I hope this letter finds you well. My name is Margaret Lewis, and I've been admiring your establishment for some time. I understand from various sources that you might be considering a change in ownership. I am a serious buyer with cash for a substantial down payment and excellent credit. More importantly, I have a deep appreciation for what you've built at Harbor and Hearth and would be committed to maintaining its reputation for excellence. If you're interested in a discreet conversation about possibilities, I would welcome the opportunity to meet. I believe we might find an arrangement that would benefit us both. Sometimes the best opportunities come from unexpected places. I included my phone number and mailed it the next morning. He called 3 days later. Mrs. Lewis? This is Daniel Brooks. I got your letter. His voice was cautious but curious. I have to admit, I wasn't expecting. How did you know I was thinking of selling? A fortunate guess, I said smoothly, and perhaps good timing. Would you be willing to meet? Privately? We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop in Castle Hayne, away from downtown eyes. I arrived early, choosing a corner table. When Daniel walked in, I saw a man who looked like I'd felt after 37 years of managing 6-year-olds, exhausted, but trying not to show it. You're not what I expected, he said, settling across from me. Former elementary school teacher, I said, extending my hand, but I've always believed in second acts. We talked for 2 hours. I let him guide the conversation, sharing his frustrations, his dreams of retirement, his fear that selling to a corporation would destroy what he'd built. I listened with the same attention I'd once given to worried parents, nodding at the right moments, asking gentle questions. The problem is, he said finally, I need someone who understands this isn't just a business. It's a community institution, the staff. Some of them have been with me for years. Mr. Brooks, I said, leaning forward, I spent nearly 4 decades nurturing growth and maintaining standards. The scale is different, but the principles are the same. I would treat your restaurant with the same care I gave my classroom. He studied me for a long moment. The asking price is $2.3 million. The real estate alone is worth $1.8. I didn't flinch. I have $300,000 ready for a down payment. My credit is impeccable, and I've already spoken with my financial advisor about loan options. But more than that, I can promise you this. Harbor and Hearth will remain the jewel of Water Street. Why? He asked suddenly. Why would a retired teacher want this headache? I smiled, the same smile I'd worn leaving the restaurant that night. Let's just say I have very personal reasons for wanting to be part of Harbor and Hearth's future. Reasons that guarantee I'll pour everything I have into its success. He nodded slowly. I'll need to think about it. Talk to my wife. But Mrs. Lewis, I have a good feeling about this. As we shook hands, I knew I'd cleared the first hurdle. The chess pieces were moving into position. The Kents thought they'd had the last laugh, but I was just getting started. The seed of my plan had taken root. Now it was time to tend it carefully, patiently, the way I'd once nurtured struggling students. The best victories, I'd learned, were the ones nobody saw coming until it was too late to stop them. Daniel Brooks called me back within a week, suggesting we meet at his office above the restaurant at 10 a.m. on a Monday when they were closed. I dressed carefully, not the pearls and navy dress this time, but a charcoal blazer I'd bought years ago for school board meetings, paired with pressed slacks and sensible heels. I carried a leather portfolio filled with my research, financial statements, and a business plan I'd spent sleepless nights perfecting. The office was exactly what I'd expected, cluttered with invoices, staff schedules, vendor catalogs. A photo of Daniel with his grandchildren sat next to a half-empty bottle of antacids. He looked relieved to see me. Margaret, he said, gesturing to a chair. I've given this a lot of thought. Talked to my wife. My lawyer, my accountant, they all think I'm crazy to consider selling to someone with no restaurant experience. My heart sank, but I kept my expression neutral, the same face I'd worn through countless parent conferences where I'd been blamed for their child's behavior. But, he continued, I've been in this business 40 years. I've seen MBAs with perfect resumes run places into the ground, and I've seen unlikely people create magic. You remind me of someone. Oh, my third-grade teacher, Mrs. Simmons, toughest woman I ever met, but fair. She had this way of seeing exactly who you were and expecting you to be better. He smiled. I have a feeling you're the same kind of person. We spent the next 3 hours going through everything. Real numbers, not the sanitized version shown to casual buyers. The restaurant cleared about $400,000 in profit annually, but the hours were brutal. The staff turnover high, the constant maintenance exhausting. Your bartender mentioned Laura, I said casually. The server? Is she one of your long-term employees? 2 years, Daniel said. Good at her job. Brings in regulars. Why? Just getting a sense of the staff, I said, making a note. I believe in understanding all the assets. We agreed on terms that afternoon. $2.1 million, with my $300,000 down and an owner carryback of $300,000 to help with the bank loan. The catch, which wasn't really a catch for me, was absolute secrecy until closing. I don't want vultures circling, Daniel said. No staff changes, no announcements, nothing until papers are signed. Can you live with that? Mr. Brooks, I said. I spent decades managing Christmas pageant secrets from 6-year-olds. I think I can handle this. The next 6 weeks were a blur of bank meetings, lawyer consultations, and late nights studying profit and loss statements. Elaine proved invaluable, connecting me with the right commercial loan officer at First National Bank of Wilmington. Margaret Lewis, the loan officer. Patricia Henley, looked surprised when we met. Didn't you teach my daughter Emma? 3rd grade, 4 years ago, I said, smiling. She wrote beautiful poetry for such a young child. She still does, thanks to you. Patricia's demeanor warmed considerably. Now, let's talk about this restaurant venture. The loan process was invasive, worse than any school district audit. They wanted 5 years of tax returns, proof of the inheritance, letters of reference. I provided everything, maintaining the same methodical organization that had once earned me Teacher of the Year 3 times. Your debt-to-income ratio is excellent, Patricia said during our 3rd meeting. And frankly, your personal character references are some of the strongest I've seen. Do you know how many former students' parents wrote letters for you? I didn't ask anyone to... That's what makes it impressive. She stamped the approval. The bank's going to approve the loan. Congratulations, Mrs. Lewis. The closing was set for a Thursday morning at 9 a.m. at Elaine's law office. I signed my name dozens of times, each signature bringing me closer to my goal. Daniel looked emotional as he handed over the keys. There's a manager meeting at 2 p.m. today, he said. I'll introduce you as the new owner. After that, it's your show. Thank you, Daniel. I shook his hand firmly. I promise you won't regret this. He paused at the door. Margaret, can I ask something? That night you mentioned the personal reasons for wanting this. Was someone unkind to you at my restaurant? I considered my words carefully. Let's just say I have a deep motivation to ensure every guest at Harbor and Hearth feels valued, regardless of what they order or what they choose not to order. Understanding flickered in his eyes. I see, well, I have a feeling things are about to get very interesting on Water Street. That afternoon, I stood in the restaurant kitchen for the first time as owner. The familiar smell of sautéing garlic and fresh herbs filled the air, but now it was my garlic, my herbs, my kitchen. The staff filed in for the meeting, curious and apprehensive. Everyone, this is Margaret Lewis, Daniel announced. She's the new owner of Harbor and Hearth. I know this is sudden, but I promise you're in good hands. I watched their faces, the sous chef's skepticism, the hostess's worry, Laura's poorly concealed shock. She whispered something to another server, probably about the old lady who couldn't afford dessert. "Thank you all for being here," I said, using my teacher voice, calm but commanding. "I know change can be unsettling, but I want to assure you that I'm committed to maintaining the excellence of Harbor and Hearth. Over the coming weeks, I'll be meeting with each of you individually to discuss your roles and hear your thoughts about the restaurant." "What's your experience?" the sous chef asked bluntly. 37 years of managing people, maintaining standards, and creating environments where everyone can succeed. I replied, "The setting is different, but the principles are the same. I believe in fairness, hard work, and mutual respect." Laura raised her hand with exaggerated politeness. "Will you be making any immediate changes?" I met her eyes steadily. "Only where necessary to improve our service and ensure every guest has an exceptional experience. I'll be observing operations closely before making any decisions." The meeting dispersed with the staff murmuring among themselves. Daniel stayed behind. "They'll test you," he warned. "Especially Laura. She's got a following among some of the younger staff. I've been tested by 7-year-olds having meltdowns." I said, "I think I can handle it." That night, I sat in my new office, looking down at the dining room through the one-way glass Daniel had installed years ago. The restaurant hummed with its usual elegant energy. Couples leaned across candlelit tables, business deals were struck over wine, families celebrated milestones. Soon, very soon, the Kents would return to their favorite table, expecting their usual fawning service, never imagining that the woman they'd humiliated now held all the cards. I opened the staff files and began to read, paying special attention to Laura's. Every general needs to know their battlefield, and I was just getting started with reconnaissance. The real campaign would begin when they walked through those doors again. The chess pieces were all in position. Now I just had to wait for the perfect moment to reveal the checkmate I'd been planning since that night they'd laughed at me over chocolate soufflé. The weight of the keys in my hand felt like possibility itself. That first morning as owner, I arrived at 6 a.m., 3 hours before the lunch prep would begin. The restaurant was mine to explore without watchful eyes, and I intended to learn every corner of my new domain. I started in the wine cellar, running my fingers along the temperature-controlled racks. Each bottle represented a choice, a price point, a potential moment of judgment. The reserve section held vintages worth more than my monthly teacher's pension. I made notes about inventory, markups, which wines moved quickly and which gathered dust. The kitchen came next. Every surface gleamed with professional-grade steel. But I noticed the small things. Worn spots on the prep stations where thousands of meals had been crafted. The oven door that required an extra push to seal properly. The way certain tiles near the dishwasher had begun to crack. Details that spoke of age and constant use. The kind of maintenance issues Daniel had probably been too tired to address. In the office, I found treasures of a different sort. 3 filing cabinets held years of history, vendor contracts, staff evaluations, customer feedback forms. I spent hours reading, building a mental map of Harbor and Hearth's ecosystem. Laura's file was particularly illuminating. Strong sales numbers, yes, but also 3 customer complaints in the past year about attitude and condescension. Daniel's notes were diplomatic, but I could read between the lines. By the time the first staff arrived at 9 a.m., I'd filled an entire notebook with observations and plans. My assistant manager, Robert, seemed surprised to find me already there. "Mrs. Lewis, I didn't expect. Most owners don't usually." "I'm not most owners," I said pleasantly. "I believe in understanding every aspect of what I'm responsible for. Could you walk me through today's reservations?" Robert relaxed slightly as we reviewed the booking system. A graduation party at noon, several business lunches, and, my pulse quickened, a 7:30 p.m. reservation for 4 under the name Kent. "The Kents are regulars," Robert noted. "They usually request table 7, the round one by the window. Very particular about their service. Laura usually handles them." "I see." I kept my voice neutral. And do we keep notes on regular guests' preferences? Some servers do, informally. Laura knows their wines, their favorite dishes. Starting today, I'd like all guest preferences documented in our system. Every regular should feel remembered, not just the ones who tip exceptionally well. The lunch service was my first real test. I stationed myself at the host stand, greeting guests, watching the flow of service. The graduation party arrived in waves, excited teenagers and proud parents filling the main dining room. I noticed how Laura charmed them, upselling desserts with practiced ease, while barely acknowledging a quiet couple at a two-top who were clearly on a budget date. During the afternoon lull, I called a brief staff meeting. I've been observing today, and I'm impressed by the professionalism I've seen. I began. However, I want to address something important. Every guest who walks through our doors deserves the same level of service excellence, whether they're ordering the tasting menu or just soup and salad. Laura's jaw tightened. Of course, Mrs. Lewis, though some guests do have higher expectations. All guests should have high expectations of us, I replied. That's what distinguishes a good restaurant from a great one. Starting tonight, I'll be personally monitoring service standards across all sections. As the dinner hour approached, I positioned myself where I could see both the dining room and the kitchen pass. My hands were steady, but my heart raced like it had before particularly challenging parent conferences. Everything I'd planned led to this moment. At 7:25 p.m., I watched Harold Kent's Mercedes pull into the valet zone. They emerged in their typical finery, Vivian in a cream silk blouse that probably cost more than most people's rent, Harold in another of his pristine suits. Samantha wore red, her arm linked through marks. My son looked happy but slightly nervous, the way he had as a child when trying to please too many people at once. Laura practically glowed when she saw them, rushing to their table with menus and enthusiasm. I watched from my partially concealed spot as they settled into their usual seats. Harold ordering wine without consulting the list, Vivian adjusting her chair multiple times until the angle satisfied her. "Robert," I said quietly, "I'll be overseeing Table 7 personally tonight. Please inform Laura that I'll need to speak with her about Table 12 when she has a moment. But Table 12 is empty. Yes. Just deliver the message. Please." I waited until they'd ordered their appetizers, then made my move. I approached their table with measured steps, my expression professionally pleasant. "Good evening," I said. "I wanted to personally welcome you to Harbor and Hearth. I'm Margaret Lewis, the new owner." The transformation was instant and delicious. Vivian's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Harold's confident smile faltered. Samantha's mouth opened slightly, then closed, like a fish suddenly aware it was out of water. Only Mark seemed genuinely pleased. "Mom, you bought... When did you..." "Recently," I said, savoring the moment. "I wanted to ensure every guest has an exceptional experience here. I remember you're fond of our dessert selection. Mrs. Kent. I'll make sure Laura presents our full range of options when the time comes." Vivian's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "Margaret, what a... surprise." "Life is full of surprises," I agreed. "I do hope you'll enjoy your meal. The salmon is particularly good tonight. I can personally recommend it, though of course, some of us appreciate simpler pleasures." I turned to address the room, raising my voice just enough to carry, "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment, I wanted to introduce myself as Harbor and Hearth's new owner, and thank you all for dining with us. Your presence here tonight means the world to me, and I'm committed to ensuring every guest feels valued and respected, regardless of what they order or choose not to order." A smattering of applause rippled through the dining room. I nodded graciously and turned back to the Kent table. "Please, enjoy your evening. Oh, and Laura," I called to the server who was hovering nearby, her face a mask of poorly concealed anxiety. "Could you see me in the office after you've taken their entree order? We need to discuss your future here." As I walked away, I could feel their stares burning into my back. The murmur of shocked conversation rose behind me, but I didn't turn around. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Let them feel. For once, what it was like to be judged and found wanting in my office. I pulled Laura's file and began drafting her termination paperwork through the one-way glass. I could see the Kents picking at their appetizers, their animated conversation occasionally punctuated by glances toward the office windows. The knock on my door came sooner than expected. Laura entered, her earlier confidence replaced by uncertainty. "You wanted to see me, Mrs. Lewis." "Sit down, Laura." I folded my hands on the desk, channeling every parent conference where I'd had to deliver difficult news. "We need to discuss your approach to service and whether it aligns with Harbor and Hearth's values moving forward." The night was far from over, but the opening gambit had been played perfectly. Downstairs at table 7, my son was learning that his mother had more than one face, and the Kents were discovering that their favorite restaurant had just become hostile territory. The best part? This was only the beginning. Laura sat across from me, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her thigh, the only sign of her nervousness. Through the one-way glass, I could see the Kents at their table, Harold gesturing animatedly while Vivian kept glancing toward the office. "I'll be direct," I said, opening her file. "Your sales numbers are strong, but I have concerns about your service philosophy. 3 complaints in 12 months about dismissive treatment of guests. Can you explain?" Her chin lifted defiantly. "Those complaints were from people who didn't understand fine dining. They ordered house wine and asked for substitutions on chef's specials. I maintained our standards." "Whose standards, I asked quietly. "Because my standards include treating every guest with equal respect, whether they're ordering a $300 bottle or tap water. Mr. Brooks never had a problem with—" "I'm not Mr. Brooks." I let the words hang in the air. "Tell me, Laura, do you remember serving a party of 4 about 2 months ago? The Kents, their son, and an older woman who declined dessert?" The color drained from her face as understanding dawned. "That was you." "Indeed, and do you remember smirking when Mrs. Kent made her comments about penny pinching? The way you looked at another server? Sharing the joke?" Laura's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. I continued, my voice steady as if explaining a math problem to a 3rd grader. "Harbor and Hearth succeeds because guests trust us with their celebrations, their business deals, their first dates, their family moments. When you mock a guest, any guest, you break that trust. When you decide someone doesn't deserve your best service based on what they order, you damage our reputation. I didn't mean, but you did." I pulled out the termination paperwork. "Your employment here ends tonight. You'll receive 2 weeks severance, which is more generous than required. Robert will collect your things from the staff area." Laura's composure finally cracked. "You can't fire me over one incident. I have regulars who specifically request me." "Like the Kents?" I smiled thinly. "They'll adjust. Good service is about consistency, not favoritism." "This is revenge," she hissed, dropping all pretense. "You're using your position to settle a personal score." I stood, moving to open the door. "No, Laura, this is business. You revealed your character that night, and it's not the character I want representing my restaurant. Robert will escort you out through the back." As she stormed past me, I called out, "Oh, and Laura? That $15 dessert you found so amusing? It costs us $4 to make. The real profit in restaurants isn't in overpriced soufflés. It's in treating every guest like they matter. You never learned that lesson." Robert appeared quickly, his expression carefully neutral as he led Laura away. I took a moment to compose myself, then returned to the dining room floor. The restaurant's atmosphere had shifted. Staff moved with extra precision, aware that the new owner meant business. Conversations seemed more subdued, punctuated by glances toward table 7, where the Kents sat with their barely touched entrees. I made my rounds, stopping at each table to introduce myself, asking about their meals. The elderly couple at table 3 beamed when I complimented their choice of the evening special. A young family with 2 children received crayons and coloring sheets I'd found in the hostess station, a touch Daniel had let lapse. Finally, I approached table 7, "How are your entrees?" I asked pleasantly. Mark spoke first, his voice strained. "Mom, why didn't you tell me? Some surprises are best revealed at the right moment," I said, meeting his eyes. Like engagement announcements at family dinners. Samantha's fork clattered against her plate. "This is highly inappropriate. You're using your position to harass us." "Harass?" I repeated, as if tasting the word. "I'm checking on your dining experience, just as I have with every other table. Would you prefer I ignore you? Treat you differently than other guests?" Harold cleared his throat. "The salmon is overcooked." I studied his plate. The fish was perfectly prepared, pink in the center, crispy skin. "I apologize if it's not to your liking. Would you care for something else? Perhaps something more economical? I'd hate for you to waste money on food you don't enjoy." Vivian's voice was ice. "We're fine." "Wonderful. Laura won't be completing your service tonight. I'm afraid she's no longer with us, but Thomas will take excellent care of you." I signaled to one of my most professional servers. "He treats all our guests with equal respect. I'm sure you'll appreciate that." "Where's Laura?" Samantha demanded. "Pursuing other opportunities? Sometimes people reveal they're not the right fit for an establishment's values." I paused, letting that sink in. "Now, I believe you usually enjoy our dessert selection. Thomas will present our full array when you're ready. Please, take your time deciding. I know how important those choices can be." I turned to address the room again, my teacher's voice carrying clearly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to share that tonight we're donating 10% of all dessert sales to the Wilmington Community Food Bank. Because at Harbor and Hearth, we believe everyone deserves to enjoy good food, regardless of their circumstances." Applause broke out across the dining room. Several tables that had finished their meals called Thomas over to order dessert. The gesture cost me nothing. The markup on desserts meant we'd still profit, but the message was clear. I returned to my position where I could observe the room. The Kents sat in their bubble of discomfort, their usual loud conversation reduced to whispers. Other diners kept glancing at them, probably wondering what they'd done to earn such pointed attention from the owner. At 8:45 p.m., they called for the check without ordering dessert. The irony was delicious. They couldn't bear to order the very course they'd used to humiliate me, not with the entire restaurant watching, not with my announcement about charity hanging in the air. As they prepared to leave, I positioned myself by the door. "I hope everything was satisfactory," I said, my smile perfectly professional. Harold muttered something noncommittal. Vivian clutched her purse like a shield, but it was Samantha who stopped, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "Of course not," I agreed. "You're always welcome at Harbor and Hearth. Every guest is, as long as they treat our staff and other patrons with respect. Have a lovely evening." Mark lingered after the others had exited. "Mom, what happened? This isn't like you." I touched his cheek gently, the way I had when he was small. "Sometimes people show you who they are, sweetheart. And sometimes you need to show them who you are in return. Your fiancée and her family taught me a valuable lesson about dignity. I'm simply returning the favor. But go," I said softly. "They're waiting. We'll talk later." As the door closed behind him, I felt the adrenaline that had carried me through the evening begin to fade. Several diners caught my eye, raising their glasses in subtle salutes. The elderly couple from table 3 stopped to shake my hand on their way out. "That was something," the woman whispered. "About time someone put those types in their place." The restaurant stayed busy until closing. Dessert sales were up 40% from a typical Friday, whether from genuine appetite or solidarity. I didn't care. Thomas reported that he'd received a $1 tip on a $200 bill from the Kents, but other tables had more than made up for it. As the last guest departed and the staff began their closing duties, Robert approached me. "That was quite an evening," he said carefully. "Yes," I agreed, "and it's just the beginning. Schedule a full staff meeting for Monday morning. We have a restaurant to transform." I stayed until midnight, helping the crew close, learning their names, their stories. By the time I locked the doors, I'd won over most of them. They'd seen me stand up to the kind of customers who usually made their lives miserable, and they'd seen me do it with style. The Kents thought they'd had the last word that night 2 months ago. They were wrong. Tonight was my opening statement, and I was far from finished making my case. By Monday morning, Harbor and Hearth's Friday night drama had become the talk of Wilmington's social circles. My phone buzzed with texts from former colleagues who'd heard various versions of the story, each more embellished than the last. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the transformation I'd planned. The staff meeting began at 9 a.m. sharp. The entire team gathered in the main dining room, some looking eager, others wary. I'd prepared folders for each employee containing new service standards, training schedules, and, most importantly, a revised commission structure that rewarded consistent excellence over favoritism. "Good morning," I began, standing where every seat could see me. Friday night, you witnessed a change in how Harbor and Hearth operates. Some of you might have questions. Let me be clear. This restaurant will no longer cater to anyone's ego at the expense of others' dignity. A young server raised her hand. But what about our regular big spenders? Won't they go elsewhere? Those who value quality and professional service will stay. I replied, those who come here to feel superior by making others feel small, they're welcome to find another stage for their performances. The meeting lasted 2 hours. We discussed everything from greeting protocols to handling difficult customers. I introduced a new policy. Any staff member subjected to deliberate humiliation or disrespect could discreetly signal management, who would intervene immediately. The relief on several faces told me everything about what they'd endured under the old system. By Tuesday, word had spread further. A food blogger called requesting an interview about the new direction at Harbor and Hearth. I declined politely, but made sure she had a reservation for Thursday evening. Let the food and service speak for themselves. Wednesday brought unexpected fallout. Elaine called me at 7 a.m., her lawyer voice in full effect. "Maggie, I just received a rather interesting letter from Harold Kent's attorney. They're claiming you created a hostile business environment and demanding a formal apology." I laughed, actually laughed. On what grounds? Intentional infliction of emotional distress, apparently. They claim you publicly humiliated them in retaliation for a private social interaction. And what do you think? I think Harold Kent is used to throwing his weight around and can't stand that someone threw back. The letter has no legal merit. Want me to respond? Please do. And Elaine, make sure your response is impeccably polite. Kill them with kindness, as they say. That afternoon, I was reviewing vendor contracts when Robert knocked urgently. "Mrs. Lewis, we have a situation. There's a health department inspector here. Says they received a complaint about food safety violations." My stomach clenched, but I kept my expression calm. "Show them in. And Robert, start pulling all our temperature logs and cleaning schedules. Let's make this easy for them." The inspector, a thorough woman named Patricia Shields, spent 3 hours examining everything from our freezer temperatures to the dishwasher's sanitization cycle. I accompanied her personally, answering questions and providing documentation. "Mrs. Lewis," she said finally, "I've been doing this for 15 years. This is one of the cleanest kitchens I've inspected. Whoever filed this complaint wasted both our time. May I ask who filed it?" She consulted her tablet. Anonymous, but they were very specific about alleged violations, almost like they'd researched what to claim. She gave me a knowing look. "You might want to be careful. Someone seems to have it out for you." After she left, with Harbor and Hearth earning a perfect score, I called a contact at the Wilmington Star-News. "I think you might be interested in a story about mysterious health department complaints against new restaurant owners," I said, "especially when those complaints prove baseless." By Friday, the attempted sabotage had backfired spectacularly. The newspaper ran a piece about Harbor and Hearth's perfect health score and my commitment to maintaining the highest standards. They even mentioned the charitable dessert program I'd announced the previous week, which I decided to make permanent. But the Kents weren't finished. Saturday evening, As we prepared for the dinner rush, a group of 12 arrived without a reservation, led by Vivian's best friend, Dorothy Wheaton, a woman who chaired half the charitable boards in Wilmington. "We simply must have a table," Dorothy declared loudly. "The Cancer Society board always dines here after our meetings." Robert looked at me helplessly. We were fully booked. "Mrs. Wheaton," I said warmly, recognizing the test. "How wonderful to see you. Unfortunately, we're completely reserved tonight. However, I'd be delighted to arrange a table for your group next Saturday, and Harbor and Hearth will donate 20% of your check to the Cancer Society." She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "Well, that's very generous, but we're here now. I understand, and I apologize for the inconvenience, but I couldn't possibly ask guests with reservations to give up their tables. That wouldn't be fair, would it? I'm sure you understand, given your commitment to treating everyone equitably through your charitable work." The trap was elegant. Refuse my offer and look petty, or accept and validate my position that all guests deserve equal treatment. Dorothy chose wisely. "Next Saturday will be fine," she said stiffly. As they left, I heard one board member whisper, "Vivian said she was vindictive, but that seemed perfectly reasonable to me." The following week brought more small skirmishes. Anonymous one-star reviews appeared online, all hitting the same talking points about management targeting certain guests and reverse discrimination against successful patrons. I responded to each one professionally, inviting the reviewers to contact me directly to address their concerns. None did. Meanwhile, genuine reviews poured in praising the improved service and welcoming atmosphere. A mother thanked us for treating her family with the same attention given to business dinners. A young couple mentioned feeling comfortable despite being obviously on a budget date. 3 weeks after the initial confrontation, Mark finally called. "Mom, can we talk? Really talk?" We met for coffee, not at Harbor and Hearth, but at a small cafe near the riverfront. He looked tired, stressed in a way that reminded me of his father during difficult times. "Samantha's furious," he said without preamble. "Her parents are, well, they're threatening to boycott the wedding if you're involved." "I see." I stirred my coffee slowly. "And what do you think?" "I think you bought a restaurant to get revenge on my fiancé's family," he said bluntly. "But I also think maybe they deserved it. Mom, I never knew they treated you that way. Samantha said it was just a misunderstanding, but you were there." I finished. "You heard them. You saw them laugh." He nodded miserably. "I should have said something. I was just so focused on making everyone get along." "Sweetheart," I reached across to take his hand. "You can't make people get along if one side thinks they're superior to the other. That's not harmony. It's hierarchy. So what do? You decide what kind of life you want. One where your mother is considered not good enough for your new family? Or one built on actual respect?" He left without answers, but I saw him thinking, that was enough for now. By month's end, Harbor and Hearth was thriving. We'd increased revenue by 15% through improved service and word of mouth. The Kents hadn't returned, though Samantha had tried to make a reservation under a friend's name, Thomas, recognizing her voice, politely informed her we were booked solid for the next month. The war wasn't over. People like the Kents didn't give up easily. But I'd won the crucial first battles. I'd shown them that money couldn't buy everything, that their social position wasn't unassailable, and that a retired school teacher they'd dismissed as beneath them could play their games better than they ever imagined, every night. As I locked up the restaurant, I thought about that dessert I'd declined. $15 saved had bought me something worth far more. The power to teach one final lesson about respect, dignity, and the danger of underestimating someone just because they count their pennies. The best part? This education was far from over. The formal complaint arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier with the kind of pomp that suggested Harold Kent wanted to ensure I knew he meant business. The envelope bore the letterhead of Kent, Morrison and Associates. Apparently, Harold had pulled strings with his law firm to make this official. Robert brought it to my office, his face concerned. "This looks serious. Mrs. Lewis." I opened it carefully, reading through 3 pages of legal pomposity. The gist: I had created a discriminatory environment that targeted specific patrons based on their socioeconomic status. They demanded a public apology, the reinstatement of Laura, and a written guarantee that the Kents would receive appropriate service befitting their standing in the community. I actually smiled. They just handed me exactly what I needed. "Robert," I said, "please contact the Wilmington Business Alliance. Tell them I'd like to address this matter at their next meeting. And call Patricia at the Star News. I have a story for her." Within hours, Elaine had crafted our response, a masterpiece of legal aikido that used their own accusations against them. She pointed out that demanding special treatment based on socioeconomic status was itself discriminatory. She included copies of our new service standards, which explicitly stated that all guests would be treated with equal respect regardless of what they ordered or their perceived social standing. But the real counterstrike came from an unexpected source. That afternoon, 3 former Harbor and Hearth employees contacted me. Having heard about the complaint through the restaurant grapevine, each had stories about the Kents' behavior over the years, demands for free meals when orders were imperfect, verbal abuse of staff, and yes, public mockery of other guests they deemed inferior. I'll testify if needed. One former waiter told me, "They made my life hell for 2 years. When I finally quit, Vivian told Daniel I was too sensitive for fine dining." By Thursday, the story had evolved beyond my control in the best possible way. The Business Alliance meeting was standing room only, with restaurant owners, local merchants, and curious citizens filling every seat. Harold and Vivian sat in the front row, clearly expecting vindication. I stood at the podium in my best teaching dress, the same one I'd worn to countless school board meetings when fighting for my students. "Good evening," I began. "I'm here to address accusations that Harbor and Hearth discriminates against wealthy patrons. The irony isn't lost on me." A ripple of chuckles crossed the room. 2 months ago, I was mocked at my own son's engagement dinner for declining a $15 dessert. The people who laughed at me for being frugal now claim they're victims because I expect them to treat all guests and staff with respect. I clicked to my first slide, our new service standards. These are the policies the Kents object to: equal treatment for all guests, protection for staff against verbal abuse, no preferential seating based on perceived importance. If these standards discriminate against anyone, it's only against those who believe their bank accounts entitle them to treat others as lesser beings. Harold stood up. "This is a vendetta." "Mr. Kent," the Alliance president interrupted, "you'll have your turn to speak." I continued, showing revenue figures, positive reviews, and employee satisfaction surveys. Harbor and Hearth isn't just surviving without catering to egos. We're thriving. We've increased charitable giving, improved staff retention, and created an environment where everyone feels welcome. When Harold finally spoke, his face was flushed with anger. "This woman bought the restaurant specifically to target my family. She's admitted as much." "I bought the restaurant," I corrected calmly, "because I saw an opportunity to create something better. If your family feels targeted by policies that treat everyone equally, perhaps you should examine why equality feels like oppression to you." The room erupted. Several restaurant owners stood to share their own stories about demanding customers who expected special treatment. A young woman I didn't recognize spoke about being berated by Vivian at a charity luncheon for wearing department store shoes. The Alliance president finally called for order. "Mr. Kent, while your complaint has been noted, I see no evidence of discrimination. Mrs. Lewis appears to be running her establishment according to principles most of us would applaud. Case closed." As the meeting dispersed, Dorothy Wheaton approached me. "Margaret, I owe you an apology. I let Vivian convince me you were being vindictive. But I've been watching how you handle this and, well, I'd like to move our Cancer Society dinner to Harbor and Hearth permanently." The following week brought an unexpected twist. A food critic from Charlotte arrived unannounced. Someone had nominated Harbor and Hearth for a Restaurant Transformation of the Year feature. She spent 3 hours observing service, interviewing staff, and sampling menu items. "Your sous chef tells me morale has never been higher," she commented over coffee. "Your waitstaff actually seems happy. That's rare in this industry." "Happy staff means better service," I replied. "Better service means happy customers. It's not complicated unless ego gets in the way." Her article, published the following Sunday, was titled "The Democratization of Fine Dining: How One Owner's Stand Against Snobbery Revitalized a Wilmington Institution." It featured a photo of me in the dining room, surrounded by smiling staff. The Kents made one last attempt at salvage. They organized what they clearly thought would be a boycott, emails to their social circle urging them to avoid Harbor and Hearth. Instead, it backfired spectacularly. Many recipients forwarded the emails to me with notes like, "Finally, someone stood up to them," and "Table for 4 this Saturday, please. The health inspector, Patricia Shields, stopped by for lunch one day. Anonymous complaint again," she said with a wry smile. "Same handwriting on the form. I told them we don't investigate the same restaurant twice in 1 month without evidence. Thought you'd want to know." Mark visited the restaurant the following week, alone this time. He sat at the bar, nursing a beer while I finished the evening rounds. "Samantha and I are postponing the wedding," he said quietly, maybe indefinitely. "I keep thinking about that night, about how they treated you, how I let them. If they could do that to my mother, what would they do to our children if they didn't measure up?" I hugged him then, right there in the middle of my restaurant. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. "That took courage. I learned from the best," he replied. "You taught me to stand up for what's right, even when it costs something." 2 months after purchasing Harbor and Hearth, I stood in my office looking down at the reservation book. The Kent's usual table was booked solid for the next 3 months, requested specifically by guests who'd heard the story and wanted to sit where it all happened. Their complaint to the Business Alliance had been formally dismissed. Their attempted boycott had increased our visibility and reservations. Their health department harassment had resulted in public praise for our standards. Every move they made had only strengthened my position. But the sweetest victory came in a handwritten note from Daniel Brooks. "Margaret, I've been following the news. You've done something I never had the courage to do. You've made Harbor and Hearth stand for something more than just good food. It's become a place where principles matter. Thank you for saving my restaurant's soul." I framed that note and hung it where I could see it every day, right next to the business card I'd stolen that night when everything began. It reminded me that sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. Sometimes it's transformation, taking something that was used to hurt you and turning it into something that helps everyone. The Kents had taught me an invaluable lesson that night. They laughed at me over dessert. They showed me that power without principles is just bullying with a bank account. Now I had both power and principles, and I was using them to create the kind of place where no one would ever be mocked for ordering within their means. As for the Kents, they'd learned their own lesson. Never underestimate a teacher. We're used to dealing with difficult children, and we always grade on behavior. The Wilmington Autumn Charity Gala was the social event of the season, held at the convention center overlooking the Cape Fear River. Every prominent family in the city would attend, with proceeds benefiting the regional hospital's new pediatric wing. As the owner of Harbor and Hearth, I'd purchased a platinum table, not for status, but because I believed in the cause. I arrived at 6:30 p.m. sharp, wearing a new midnight blue gown I'd bought for the occasion. Not ostentatious, but elegant enough to hold my own in any room. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and conversation, the city's elite mingling over champagne and expectations. My table was prominently placed, a recognition of Harbor and Hearth's increased charitable contributions over the past months. Several city council members joined me, along with Dorothy Wheaton and, to my surprise, Patricia Shields from the health department, who'd become a regular customer. The Kents, naturally, occupied their usual position near the stage, holding court with their diminished but still present circle. Vivian wore diamonds that caught the light like tiny daggers, while Harold glad-handed anyone still willing to acknowledge them. Their influence had waned considerably since our public confrontation, but old money dies hard in the South. Dinner service began at 7 p.m., and I noticed with amusement that it was catered by Harbor and Hearth's main competitor, a place the Kents had been frequenting since their self-imposed exile from my establishment. The salmon was overcooked, the sauce separated, the vegetables mushy. I ate without comment, but others at my table weren't as discreet. "Makes you appreciate what you've built at Harbor and Hearth," Dorothy murmured, pushing her plate away. The evening's program included the usual speeches and acknowledgments. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for, the announcement of the Business Leadership Award, given annually to someone who demonstrated exceptional community impact. This year's recipient, the hospital's board president announced, has shown us that true leadership isn't about maintaining the status quo. It's about having the courage to create positive change, even when facing opposition. Please welcome Margaret Lewis of Harbor and Hearth. The applause was thunderous. As I stood, I caught sight of the Kents' faces, Vivian's mouth open in shock, Harold's complexion shifting from red to purple. They hadn't known. The committee had kept the decision confidential until tonight. I walked to the stage with the same measured pace I'd used that night months ago when I'd revealed myself as Harbor and Hearth's owner. The difference was that this time, I wasn't seeking revenge. I was receiving recognition. "Thank you," I began, looking out at the sea of faces. 6 months ago, I was a retired teacher who couldn't justify a $15 dessert. Tonight, I stand before you as a business owner who's learned that success isn't measured by what you can afford to waste, but by what you choose to build. I spoke about transformation, about creating environments where everyone feels valued, about the courage to stand up to those who confuse cruelty with class. I never mentioned the Kents by name, but everyone knew. The story had become local legend. Harbor and Hearth's success proves something important. I continued, when you treat every person with dignity, whether they're ordering water or wine, whether they're wearing designer clothes or department store specials, everyone rises. When you create a culture of respect, excellence follows. I paused, letting my gaze rest briefly on the Kents' table. Some people view equality as a threat to their status, but true status comes from what you contribute, not what you consume. It comes from lifting others up, not putting them down. The speech ended with a standing ovation. As I returned to my table, people stopped me to shake hands, share stories, offer congratulations. The Kents remained seated, isolated in their bubble of wounded pride, but the evening's surprises weren't over. During the auction portion, one item drew particular attention, a private dinner for 20 at Harbor and Hearth, with proceeds going to the hospital. Bidding was fierce, eventually reaching $5,000. The winner? A consortium of teachers from my old school, pooling their resources. "We wanted to support you," Maggie, one called out, "and prove that teachers know how to enjoy the finer things too." The moment was perfect, but what came next was even better. Harold Kent, perhaps fueled by too much wine and wounded pride, stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous," he announced loudly. "You're all celebrating someone who bought a business specifically to settle a petty score. She's vindictive, manipulative." "Harold," the voice came from across the room. Judge Catherine Morrison, senior partner at Harold's own law firm, stood slowly. "I think you've said enough. In fact, I think you've said too much, for too long, to too many people. Sit down." The silence was deafening. Harold looked around for support, finding none. Even Vivian tugged at his sleeve, recognizing the shift in the room's dynamics. He sat, deflated. As conversations resumed with pointed dismissal of his outburst, Mark appeared at my elbow as the evening wound down. "Mom, that was incredible." "How are you?" I asked gently. "Better. Clearer. Samantha moved back with her parents last week. She said I had to choose between her and you." He smiled sadly. "It wasn't even a choice. You taught me to recognize right from wrong. Took me too long to apply that lesson, but better late than never." As the gala concluded, I found myself near the exit at the same time as the Kents. For a moment, we stood facing each other, the teacher they'd mocked and the couple who'd thought themselves untouchable. "Congratulations on your award," Vivian said stiffly, the words clearly costing her. "Thank you," I replied with genuine warmth. "I hope you enjoyed your evening. Everyone deserves to feel welcomed at community events, regardless of past differences." The callback to their own words about deserving certain treatment wasn't lost on them. Harold's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. They left quickly, their departure as diminished as their reputation. Dorothy Wheaton linked her arm through mine as we walked to the valet stand. "You know what the best part is?" she said conspiratorially. "They'll never eat at Harbor and Hearth again, but they'll have to hear about it constantly. Every event, every gathering, someone will mention the wonderful time they had there. It'll be death by 1,000 cuts." "That wasn't the goal," I said honestly. "The goal was to build something better. And you did. But if some people get their just desserts along the way?" She smiled wickedly. "Well, that's just the cherry on top." The next morning, I arrived at Harbor and Hearth to find my staff had decorated the entrance with congratulations banners. The morning shift applauded as I entered, and Thomas presented me with a cake, decorated naturally, with chocolate souffle roses. "None of us will ever forget what you did," he said. "You didn't just save our jobs, you gave us dignity." I stood in my restaurant, surrounded by people who'd become like family, thinking about the journey from that humiliating night to this moment of triumph. The Kents had thought they were teaching me a lesson about knowing my place. Instead, they'd taught me about finding my power. That evening, as the dinner rush began, I took my usual position where I could observe the dining room. Every table was full, the atmosphere warm with conversation and laughter, couples on first dates, families celebrating milestones, business deals being struck, all happening in a space where everyone was treated with equal respect. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Proud of you, Mom. Dad would be too." Yes, he would be. He'd always said I had more strength than I knew. It just took some spilled champagne and mocking laughter to help me find it. As I watched my restaurant hum with life, I thought about that $15 dessert one more time. Such a small thing to have started such a large change. But then again, the best lessons often come from the smallest moments, a truth that any teacher knows. The Kents had thought the story ended when I couldn't afford dessert. They were wrong. It ended with me being able to afford everything, including the luxury of principles. They'd laughed at me over chocolate souffle, but in the end, I owned the whole damn restaurant. And that, as they say in the South, is sweeter than any dessert on the menu. They once thought the story ended when I didn't order dessert. But it turns out, that was just the appetizer. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please leave a comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about Margaret's journey. What would you have done in her situation? Your comments and experiences make our community special.